Hey guys, if your lawn tractor has really sloppy steering like this one does when you have no output at the front wheels, here's how to replace this little coupler that holds the rack and pinion together in the steering, and I'll get into how to do that. Now this applies to tractors that have been made under a number of different names. What I have here is a Quality Pro, but it's been manufactured under the Craftsman name, the AYP name, and MTD, among others. So if this isn't your exact tractor, the fix may still apply. So for better access, I'm going to remove the hood. So here, this is the electrical connector for the front lights that you can just disconnect like that. And the hood, if you rock it back and forth while lifting, will just lift right out of place pretty easily, like that, and you can set that aside. Next thing I'm going to do is take off the deck. So I already lowered it all the way down as far as it'll go, and there are 5 different cotter pins you need to undo to get it out. So there's one right here and one on the other side across from it you have to undo. This is what's used to pull it as you're driving along. Then there is one here in the back, if the camera will focus. So that one right there stabilizes the deck side to side, and so this linkage you have to pull off and it will drop down. And then there are 2 more, one on either side, right here, and these are part of what holds the deck and suspends it when you raise and lower it. So if you pull all 5 of those cotter pins out and unhook the linkages from the pins, you should be able to slide the deck right out of the side towards you. So a trick I've learned for removing cotter pins and not banging your knuckles, which isn't so big of a problem here, but it is underneath, is to stick a screwdriver through the end of it and just lift it right off. So that's pretty easy, and then the linkage will pop out like that. So if you do that in all 5 places, you will probably save your knuckles, because I've done this more than once. Now I almost forgot, there are 2 additional cotter pins you have to remove. Now these don't support the deck, but they do support, well, they help engage the cable that tensions the blade driving belt. So this spring is attached to this post that sits above this idler pulley. So there is a little cotter pin above that needs to come off. And you can lift off the washer and the end of the spring off of that shaft, okay? Then in the back, if you follow that cable back, get more light on it, you can see there is another cotter pin right here that you need to pull out that holds the sheath of where the cable attaches to the deck. So make sure that this whole thing is clear, and you can set that up on the footrest there. So when you pull the deck out, it's not going to catch. So I'm on the left side of the tractor. Now when you go to actually slide the deck out, you have to first make sure you remove the belt, and that a lot of these linkages and things under here clear. So as you pull on it, if it hangs up, you have to see what isn't clearing. But once it's all the way out, then... So next is removing the gas tank and this shroud, because they're held on in the same place. This is the previous dry socket. And this one off, and the gas tank will start to come loose. Unfortunately, getting the gas tank out from underneath this cowling here is not going to be easy because it sticks back underneath so far. So what we're going to have to do is take, I think this is a 9/16 socket to remove this bolt here. There's one just like it on the other side. And these 2 guys right here, which I've already started to undo. So take all 4 of those out, and then this cowling should be able to start rocking back and forth. And then we can see what else we have to disconnect. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove this side panel, which has a mixture of 1/2 inch and 9/16 bolts. Now keep in mind, this piece of sheet metal is folded, so there's a little grommet here that the fuel line runs through. So I may off camera pinch this fuel line off behind the wall and then disconnect the fuel filter here and feed the hose back through this hole so this panel will be free and I can pull it off. Okay, so I was able to get this side panel off. I did have to undo this little E-clip here on the that was behind the deck height indicator. And I was able to pull the gas tank and the little tray that it sat on underneath these control cables. I was able to pull them out towards the left side of the mower. Now I did have to undo 2 bolts that held the other side of the tray here to do that, but it came out fairly easily after I crimped off both the up and downstream fuel lines and disconnected them at the fuel line like I described before. And here's the very dirty gas tank. and that plate that it sits on, and that's how I capped off the fuel line. So that gas tank's pretty full, but it's not leaking, and it's not going to if you crimp it off like that. So what is next? I'm realizing in order to take this assembly apart enough to get a new coupler in place, this bolt here needs to come out, and you need a 9/16 socket to do that. And when you do that, you can begin to pull this shaft, this horizontal shaft, out to the right. But unfortunately, to do that, if you try to do that, this steering arm would hit against the body where it fits through here. So what's going to have to happen is, from the underside of the mower, which is why we took the deck off, I'm going to remove the 4 bolts that hold this whole assembly to the frame. The front 2 are here. There's 2 more behind it that you can't see, but those are also 9/16. Well, you need a 9/16 socket to remove those from underneath the mower. So the next thing we have to do is disconnect this linkage from the bottom end of the steering arm that I've got right here. And this is just a ball joint stud that you can just unscrew. The end of this steering shaft is what we just disconnected. And because we did that, now if you look at the steering arm, I guess you can see it best from the top, but this guy is now completely free, which is great. Okay, so I've wiggled this assembly apart to make it easier to see, but there's a couple really important things to pay attention to right now. This shaft is clocked to the rack by this splined shaft here. Now, if you take this apart, you need to make sure it goes back together in the same orientation, or you won't have equal travel when you compare left to right. So you may be able to turn left further than you'd be able to turn right if you don't remember. So what I've done, it's a little bit hard to see, but I've got Sharpie marker marks right here on the housing of the rack and here on the spline in a couple places. So that way when it goes back together, I can line those back up to make sure it goes back together the same way. Also, to finish getting this whole thing apart, I noticed there was another E-clip right here. Now this acts as kind of a thrust bearing to keep this whole thing from coming apart while it's in use. So you have to remove this in order to get this shaft out. Okay, and the best way I think there is to do that is to put a flathead screwdriver on this side and this side of the E-clip, and then kind of hit both at the same time to pop that clip off downwards. Okay, so here is with everything removed. This is the E-clip that I had to pull off, so don't lose that. You can put it on from only one direction, so you can just pop that on the opposite of the way it came off before. And now this guy is free here. Now it is attached to the drive shaft, but if you pull up on the steering wheel, you can raise it up like so. And let me adjust this here. And what you can do is you need what is this? This is a 3/8 inch socket, quarter inch drive. If you get underneath, you can pull the screw out. Okay. So before I put the new coupler back in, here is a comparison of the old versus the new. The input side is definitely a lot more oval shaped than the new one is. This is a very critical part of the reassembly process. So what I've done is I've reattached this linkage. Remember that ball joint that attached to the bottom of the steering arm? That is still attached. I've made sure the front wheels are both facing directly straight ahead. And I've reassembled the shaft, rack and pinion, got the new coupler in here. Now this bolt on the side that keeps the shaft in place, it is actually partially unscrewed, so this whole thing can still kind of slide in and out. And what I've done is I've kind of, with a screwdriver, widened the gap here between this little plastic bushing and the back plate of the rack. So you can see there's anti-seize in there, which is that gray material, but that is where the splines end, and wherever it is, I'm probably kneeling on it, but the little, here it is, the E-clip can fit down inside that gap, okay? And this is the step where I need to put that in. But before I do that, with the linkage attached, which you can actually see down through here, and the wheel's facing forward, this is the part where, if you need to, you can separate these guys here so that the rack and pinion are disengaged, and you need to rotate your steering wheel so it is pointing forward when the wheels are straight. Otherwise, this guy's fixed. Some of these steering wheels have a hub inside where you can clock the steering wheel a little bit without taking everything apart, but this one does not. So if you don't line up the steering wheel properly at this step, even if you have equal amounts of travel, the steering wheel might always point to one side, which you want to avoid. So once you're happy with it, put the E-clip in, and then tighten this bolt here. Okay, so I've got everything back together, and you can see now when I rock the steering wheel back and forth, there's definitely still play in the system, but it's much less pronounced than before. So if instead of a 90-degree turn on the steering wheel, slop-wise, this is how much you have. So it definitely feels better. I wound it all the way to the left, and then all the way to the right. That works. And then dead ahead is not exactly perfect with the steering wheel, but I found that you have to pick one side of a tooth or the other on the spline and on the rack and pinion, and you may not be able to center it up absolutely perfectly. But it's definitely an improvement. I think if I was going to do it again, I might be tempted to buy a replacement rack and pinion assembly just because there's other parts that are worn out. But anyway, that is the overall process. I hope that helps you out, and good luck.